There's a psychology truth most people never question, and it quietly shapes their entire life. If you grew up feeling responsible for everyone's emotions, problems, and stability, that wasn't maturity, that was pressure. And here's the uncomfortable question. Do you remember being a child who acted like an adult long before you were ready? Most people think they're just strong, reliable, or disciplined. But what if that constant need to hold everything together isn't strength at all? What if it's the reason your mental focus feels fragmented, your productivity never feels enough, and rest always comes with guilt? This pattern doesn't disappear with age, it evolves. And unless you understand it, it quietly controls your mindset, your time management, and how you try to live better. In this video, you're going to see why carrying the world on your shoulders became your identity. And more importantly, how to finally let it go without losing direction, discipline, or purpose. Because real personal growth isn't about doing more, it's about releasing what was never yours to carry in the first place. Stay quiet, stay sharp, stay in progress. You didn't become strong by choice. You adapted. When a child grows up in an environment where adults are emotionally absent, overwhelmed, or unavailable, the brain does something remarkable and costly. It steps up. You learned early that stability depended on you. That's not maturity. That's survival wiring. And it quietly shapes your mindset, your discipline, and how you approach self-development for decades. Psychology calls this parentification, and it happens more often than people admit. Maybe one parent was sick. Maybe emotions were ignored. Maybe praise only came when you were responsible. So you filled the gap. You became the calm one, the fixer, the listener, the reliable one. Your productivity wasn't ambition, it was a coping strategy your nervous system used to feel safe. The problem is, your brain doesn't forget those rules. It internalizes them. You learn that love equals usefulness, that rest feels risky, that slowing down threatens connection. Over time, this rewires how you handle time management, mental focus, and personal growth. You don't relax easily. You manage. You don't ask, you anticipate. And you call that discipline, even when it's actually fear in disguise. Here's the uncomfortable life lesson most people miss. Patterns formed for survival don't automatically expire. They follow you into adulthood, into relationships, into work, into how you try to live better. And unless you see where this started, you'll keep confusing responsibility with worth. Which raises a dangerous question. What does this pattern cost you now? Here's what nobody warns you about. The overly mature child doesn't grow into a relaxed adult. They grow into a hyper-aware one. You walk into rooms already scanning for problems. You sense emotional shifts before words are spoken. Saying no feels heavier than saying yes, because your brain still believes disappointment equals danger. That's not kindness. That's conditioning, quietly draining your mental focus. Over time, this creates predictable behavior patterns. You over-explain, you over-deliver. You stay longer than necessary in conversations, jobs, and relationships. You carry emotional weight that was never assigned to you. The irony? From the outside, it looks like discipline and high productivity. On the inside, it feels like constant tension, like you're always on call, even during rest. Eventually, you become everyone's safe harbor while having none of your own. People come to you for advice, stability, and reassurance. You rarely go to them, not because you don't need support, but because your mindset learned early that needing feels unsafe. This imbalance slowly erodes personal growth. You're functional, reliable, and quietly exhausted. And here's the hard psychological truth. This chronic emotional load doesn't disappear. It compounds. Anxiety creeps in. Motivation drops. Sometimes depression shows up disguised as burnout. You start asking yourself why self-development feels so hard despite doing everything right. The answer isn't weakness. It's that this pattern was never meant to last forever. Which brings us to the question most people avoid. How do you undo something that once kept you safe? Healing doesn't start with fixing yourself. It starts with recognizing that nothing was ever wrong. The overly mature child wasn't broken. They were adaptive. Once you validate that truth, something subtle changes in your mindset. Shame loosens its grip. You stop fighting your past and start learning from it. And that shift alone restores mental focus in a way productivity hacks never could. At the center of this process is reconnecting with the part of you that never got to be cared for. That's what people mean by inner child work. But stripped of cliches, it's simply this: allowing yourself to feel without managing the room, letting emotions exist without immediately turning them into tasks. It's uncomfortable at first because your brain was trained to equate stillness with risk. This is where practical steps matter. Therapy helps, especially approaches like schema therapy or trauma-informed CBT, which reframe early responsibility patterns. But daily habits matter too. Setting one small boundary per week, delegating a task you'd normally carry alone, blocking 10 minutes of your day for something non-productive, reading fiction, walking without a goal, listening to music without multitasking. That's self-development at a nervous system level. The most radical permission you give yourself is this: you don't have to be exceptional to be worthy. You can be imperfect. You can be supported. You can simply be. And when that permission sinks in, discipline stops being about control and starts becoming about alignment. Which raises a deeper question. If healing is possible, how do you rewire the brain so this new way of living actually sticks? Here's something most people never hear. Your brain resists healing not because it prefers pain, but because it prefers predictability. When you were a child, responsibility became your safety system. Your nervous system learned that control equals survival. So even today, when life is stable, your brain keeps recreating pressure. It thinks it's helping. This is why personal growth often feels harder than staying stuck. Neurologically, this is about habit loops and threat detection. The brain prioritizes familiar patterns over better ones. Letting go of responsibility triggers uncertainty, and uncertainty registers as danger. That's why slowing down feels wrong. Why rest creates guilt. Why time management becomes obsessive instead of intentional. Your brain confuses absence of control with loss of safety. The insight most people miss is this: discipline doesn't mean holding everything together. Real discipline is teaching your nervous system that it's safe to loosen its grip. That happens through repetition, not motivation. For example, choose one area, work, family, or relationships, and deliberately respond 10% less. Not careless, just less controlling. Let something stay unresolved overnight. Watch what happens. The discomfort fades faster than you expect. This is where mindset shifts from effort to strategy. You're not trying to become careless. You're retraining your brain to tolerate calm. And once your nervous system stops firing false alarms, mental focus returns naturally. Which leads to the next question. If the brain can be retrained, what daily systems actually support that change without overwhelming you? At some point, healing stops being emotional and becomes structural. This is where most people get stuck. Insight alone doesn't change identity. Systems do. The overly mature child often tries to think their way out of the pattern. But identity is shaped by repetition. Who you are is reinforced by what you repeatedly allow, tolerate, and prioritize. That's where real self-development actually happens. One of the most effective shifts is redefining what productivity means. Instead of measuring value by output, start measuring it by alignment. Ask a simple question at the start of the day. What actually requires my energy today, and what doesn't? Then protect one non-negotiable block of time. No rescuing, no fixing, just focused work or intentional rest. This rewires time management at a behavioral level. Another powerful tool is role separation. Write down the roles you unconsciously play: the fixer, the mediator, the reliable one.
A problem? I'll handle it.
No need, I got it.
Then decide where those roles are no longer necessary. For example, at work, stop pre-solving problems before they're assigned. In relationships, pause before offering advice. Let silence do some of the work. It feels awkward at first, but awkward is the doorway to personal growth. As these systems stabilize, something unexpected happens. Mental focus sharpens. Decision fatigue drops. You stop leaking energy into places that don't return it. And that's when a deeper realization surfaces. Letting go isn't about becoming passive. It's about choosing direction instead of obligation. Which opens the final question: how do you sustain this shift without sliding back into old patterns under pressure? Here's the final shift most people don't expect. Healing isn't about erasing responsibility. It's about choosing it consciously. The overly mature child was trained to react. The healed adult learns to respond. That distinction changes everything. You stop living in constant alert mode and start operating with intention. That's when mindset, discipline, and personal growth finally align instead of competing. At this stage, your nervous system begins to trust your decisions. You no longer say yes out of fear. You say yes because it fits. And when something doesn't, you feel it early. Not as anxiety, but as clarity. This is where self-development stops being
Yes.
exhausting and starts feeling lighter. You're no longer managing life, you're directing it. One practical anchor here is weekly reflection. Not journaling for hours, just 10 minutes. Ask 3 questions. What drained me? What supported me? What did I do out of obligation instead of choice? Patterns show up fast when you look honestly. This simple habit improves time management, protects mental focus, and prevents old roles from quietly reclaiming space. And somewhere in this phase, a subtle truth lands. You don't need to carry everything to move forward. You need precision, not pressure. That's the upgrade. The moment responsibility becomes a tool, not an identity, you start living better without forcing it, which sets the stage for the real conversation this video is leading to. What happens when you finally let go and who you become next? Now, here's what actually matters. Understanding this pattern changes nothing unless you act on it. So let me ask you something honestly. Where are you still carrying weight that was never yours to begin with? Is it in your work, your family, your relationships, or the way you manage your time and energy every single day? Letting go doesn't make you weaker. It makes your discipline precise, and precision is what allows real personal growth to last. Picture this for a moment, an adult version of you standing grounded, calm, with your inner child no longer sitting on your shoulders but walking beside you. Not abandoned, not ignored, just free from the role they were never meant to play. That's what healing actually looks like. Not losing responsibility, but choosing it consciously. That's how you build a mindset that supports mental focus, productivity, and a life that feels lighter without losing direction. So here's your move. Take one insight from this video and apply it today. Not perfectly, just intentionally. Drop it in the comments. What responsibility are you ready to release? If this helped you see yourself more clearly, make sure you subscribe to Mind in Progress and turn on notifications. We're here to upgrade your mind, one idea at a time. And before you go, remember, letting go is powerful, but reinvention happens quietly. That's exactly why you should watch the next video on your screen. The Silent 1% Method, How to Reinvent Your Life in 2026 Without Anyone Noticing. Because clarity without strategy fades. Stay quiet, stay sharp, stay in progress.